Good morning and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. We are here today in docket number 2023-5-G. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioner Justin Williams, Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carolee Williams, Commissioner Caston, and Chair Belser. I don't see Commissioner Irvin. He had approved sick leave for this morning. Wasn't sure if he would be here in time for the hearing, and obviously he is not. So he is on sick leave this morning. Let me recognize our staff counsel, Mr. Winburn, to read the docket.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are here today in docket number 2023-5-G, annual review of purchase gas adjustment and gas purchasing policies of Dominion Energy South Carolina for potential increase or decrease in the gas adjustment. All parties are here present, Madam Chair, and the docket is ready for review.
Thank you, Mr. Winburn. Let's take appearances from the parties. Who's here for Dominion Energy South Carolina?
Good morning, Chair Belser and members of the commission. I'm Chad Burgess, and with me today is Matthew Gissendanner. We are both in-house corporate counsel for Dominion Energy South Carolina, and it's a pleasure to appear before you today, and we appreciate this opportunity to present the company's case.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Welcome to you, Mr. Gissendanner. And who's here for the Office of Regulatory Staff?
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Powers, members of the Commission, good morning. Nicole Given appearing on behalf of the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff. Present with me in the hearing room this morning is Mr. Chad Torrey.
Thank you, Ms. Given, and welcome to you and Mr. Torrey. Are there any preliminary matters that would need to be addressed before we begin? I hear nothing and see head shaking no. So, Mr. Burgess, Mr. Gissendanner, please proceed with your case.
Dominion Energy calls Greg McGlohorn and Jatan Smith to the stand. Mr. McGlohorn, would you please state your name for the record?
Greg McGlohorn.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Dominion Energy, South Carolina.
And Mr. McGlohorn, have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision direct testimony of 13 pages that was previously filed with the commission in this docket?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or additions to your pre-filed direct testimony?
No.
So if I asked you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Belser, at this time, I'd like to move into the record the pre-filed direct testimony of Greg McGlohorn as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. McGlohorn's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Mr. McGlohorn, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes.
Would you please share that with us at this time?
Yes, I will. Good morning, Chair Belser and members of the Commission. The purpose of today's proceeding is to determine the prudence of Dominion Energy South Carolina's gas purchasing policies and practices during the period of August 1st, 2022 through July 31st, 2023, and to determine if the company properly applied its tariff in recovering its gas costs. The company has developed a safe and reliable natural gas system through which we serve our customers. Over time, Dominion Energy South Carolina has seen its natural gas distribution system grow to approximately 10,992 miles of pipeline, which includes approximately 10,666 miles of distribution mains and 326 miles of transmission mains, plus approximately 456,500 service lines. Through these facilities, the company delivers safe, reliable natural gas service to approximately 443,700 factories, businesses, and homes in South Carolina. Dominion Energy also owns and operates 2 liquefied natural gas facilities, which allow the storage of natural gas in liquid form to be used primarily to help meet peak loads on the system and as a backup supply of gas in emergency situations. Firm demand on the company's system has continued to grow, and Dominion Energy South Carolina has consistently improved and expanded its system by adding pipeline to serve its new and existing customers and create operating flexibility on its system. During the review period, the company prudently managed its business operations, which included the purchase and recovery of its gas supplies and administration of the PGA. Therefore, on behalf of Dominion Energy South Carolina, I respectfully request the Commission find that the company has recovered its gas costs for the review period consistent with its tariff and commission orders, and that it has purchased its gas supplies and administered the PGA in a prudent and reasonable manner. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. McGlohorn. Ms. Smith, would you please state your name for the record?
Jaton R. Smith,
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Dominion Energy Services Incorporated, as the Manager of Regulation.
And Ms. Smith, have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your supervision direct testimony of 8 pages that was previously filed with the Commission in this docket?
Yes.
Do you have any changes or additions to your direct testimony?
No, I do not.
So if I ask you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Belzer, at this time, I would ask that the direct testimony of Jaton Smith be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Smith's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the records as if testified to from the stand.
And Ms. Smith, did you also prepare 2 exhibits labeled as exhibit numbers JRS 1 and JRS 2 that were attached to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
And do you have any changes or additions to your exhibits?
No, I do not.
Chair Belzer, at this time, I would move into the record as the next hearing composite exhibit, the exhibits labeled JRS 1 and JRS 2 that were attached to the pre-filed direct testimony of Ms. Smith.
The exhibits JRS 1 and JRS 2 that were attached to Ms. Smith's pre-filed direct testimony will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 1 and received into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Ms. Smith, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I have.
Would you please share that with us?
Good morning, Chair Belzer and members of the Commission. I'm appearing today to support the company's natural gas cost recovery mechanism and to support the cost of gas data for the period under review in this proceeding, which is August 1st, 2022 through July 31st, 2023. In administering the company's cost of gas recovery mechanism, Dominion Energy South Carolina calculates the gas cost factor for each customer class each month using a rolling 12-month forecast of both demand and commodity costs. The company reviews the demand charge cost of gas allocation factors each year during the PGA proceeding and updates the factors to reflect current forecast parameters. Pursuant to order number 2023-737 and docket number 2023-70-G, these allocations are based on the forecast peak design day demand. Based on the latest demand forecast, the new DCOG allocation factors would be 75.03% for residential, 19.88% for small general service and medium general service, and 5.09% for large general service usage groups. DESC respectfully requests that these new DCOG allocation factors be approved by the Commission and made effective for the first billing cycle of January 2024. Exhibit JRS-1 accurately reflects administration of the PGA recovery mechanism as approved by the Commission, and Exhibit JRS-2 shows a summary of the monthly forecast of gas cost components and the resulting monthly over-under collection balances. The end-of-period balance of zero shows that the forecasted gas cost factors would eliminate any projected over-under collection amount by the end of the forecast period ending August 2024. During the review period, Dominion Energy South Carolina properly administered the purchase gas adjustment and correctly adjusted the gas cost recovery factors for each customer class in accordance with terms of order number 2006-679 as modified by order number 2009-910. In addition, Dominion Energy South Carolina recovered its gas costs consistent with applicable tariffs and commission orders. Accordingly, Dominion Energy South Carolina respectfully requests the commission find that the company has recovered its gas costs for the review period consistent with its tariffs and commission orders, and that it has purchased its gas supplies and administered the PGA in a prudent and reasonable manner. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Chair Belzer, the witnesses are available for questioning by ORS and the commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Gissendaner. Ms. Given or Mr. Torrey?
No questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions for this panel? Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I assume everybody can hear me. It seems like maybe this microphone's not working. Is it working?
Can hear you.
All right, thank you. Mr. McGlohorn, let's talk a little bit about the CGT system and how much of that is subscribed and how much by Dominion.
Well, CGT states that their system is, for the most part, fully subscribed. It is, I think, 99 point something % subscribed, and we own the majority of that capacity.
Okay. So when you say majority, is there a little bit more specific there, or estimated range, or?
Well, I would defer to Witness Jackson for a better answer, but I believe that number is in the 90 to 100% range.
Okay, thank you. You were talking in your testimony about a small and strategically placed mobile peak shaving compressed natural gas facility. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yes. So for this coming winter, we are going to utilize, as you said, some strategically placed temporary mobile compressed natural gas facilities. Two examples of that would be one in James Island and one will be in Blythewood area, South Carolina. And then we have a temporary mobile LNG facility planned for the North Myrtle Beach area for this coming winter season. Those are temporary in nature. We do have more permanent improvements that will eventually phase those out. But for this coming winter, they'll prop up the system pressures in those areas and allow us to serve all the customers on a design day.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about both the CNG and the LNG?
Sure.
What do they look like?
Okay.
How do they work?
Sure. The CNG is it would be a pressurized container containing compressed natural gas at several hundred to a couple thousand pounds per square inch, and it would sit on the system ready to feed if pressures got low enough, which would only happen on extremely cold days. It's possible that we go most of the winter without them feeding much at all. But if the regulators on those CNG trailers sense a low pressure on the downstream side, which will be on our system, then they would automatically begin to feed and support the local demand in that area. And the difference between the compressed natural gas and the temporary mobile liquefied natural gas is a volume. It would take a lot more CNG trailers to serve the volume that we're planning to support in Myrtle Beach, which is why we're using the LNG, because LNG can, for the same storage volume, you can keep about 600 times more gas molecules in the same volume. So as opposed to having to cycle multiple trucks in and out on a very cold day, then we can have one tanker, which would look like a liquid tanker pulled behind an 18-wheeler type thing, parked with it, and it has an ambient vaporizer on the back end of it. So what that means, it's almost like a radiator in reverse almost. The ambient air would warm the LNG and vaporize it so it can be injected into the system. So once that occurs, once the liquefied natural gas is vaporized, then it would act just like the compressed natural gas would. And these are to support small localized areas where, based on our computerized hydraulic modeling and how we put projected load onto the system, where we would predict that we might have low pressures. So they're being put there as a precaution to ensure that we can serve our customers on the coldest day, whether it actually occurs or not.
Okay. So, do these in any way relate to the movement of LNG to the Sally plant, or is this totally independent? I guess, how does that work, the Sally plant getting the gas there? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. These are temporary mobile LNG, and Sally and Bushy Park, of course, are permanent large-scale facilities. And the gas the liquefied natural gas that we use for the North Myrtle Beach facility is intended to come from the Bushy Park plant. So the same trucking hookups that we would use to truck liquefied natural gas from Bushy Park to Sally is the same trucking hookup we would use to fill this LNG tanker. And hopefully we don't have to fill it one time for the whole winter. We may not even need it, but if we do, we don't expect to cycle a lot of trucks. It should be a very limited need, but that's where the LNG would be planned to come from, is the Bushy Park. Now, it's different from the larger plants because the larger plants, we, of course, in the summertime when gas demands are low, we take gas that is not needed for customers, and then we cool it to take it from a gaseous state to a liquefied state so that we can fill up the Bushy Park tanks, and then take gas from Bushy Park and truck it to Sally and fill it up. And those are large stationary facilities that would inject gas into CGT system for later delivery to us through our town borders. But this is a very small scale, single tanker situation. It's temporary in nature because we do have planned improvements on the system to make it where we don't need these. But sometimes the development comes so fast in an area like Myrtle Beach, which is ranked #1 in the fastest growing places on U.S. News and World Report. We're growing in Myrtle Beach at a rate of 16 to 20%. There's permitting challenges, and sometimes we're not able to get the improvements in time for winter. But thankfully, we do have other options, such as temporary mobile CNG and temporary mobile LNG. But it's not something that we plan to expand the use of. In fact, we have projects on the books right now that will be accomplished in the coming year to make it where we don't need the facilities that I just mentioned.
Okay. So are any of those projects additional LNG storage facilities, or it's beefing up your pipeline system, or what, when you're talking about these projects?
Can you repeat the question? I just want to make sure I understand what you were asking,
so
Mr. Thomas.
Are you planning additional LNG permanent facilities, or strengthening your pipeline system, or
right.
What?
In most of those situations, it would be strengthening the pipeline system through pipeline improvements. For example, if you take the Blythewood project, one of the biggest reasons why we're utilizing compressed natural gas to support the Blythewood area as opposed to completing a pipeline improvement project, which we have planned, is called the Owen to Mount Valley Pipeline Improvement Project. But Scout Motors was coming to that area, and we didn't realize, or we didn't know for sure, A, whether they were going to be utilizing gas or not, and B, how much gas and at what pressures they needed. So until Scout Motors has finalized their decision, we didn't want to make a decision on a pipeline size or operating pressure that we would have to go back and redo. So effectively utilizing CNG in that area bought us another year to make that decision. And in fact, recently we just have had some discussions with Scout Motors that may indicate that they may not need as much gas as was originally communicated to us. So in this case, it's probably a good thing that we waited, because otherwise we may have over-designed that pipeline. Now in Myrtle Beach, that's an area where we have even though it's temporary mobile LNG that we currently are using, we do have a permanent, larger scale CNG facility planned for the North Myrtle Beach area. And the reason for that is just the geographic location of North Myrtle Beach and the growth that's occurring there. You have limited routes that we can run new pipelines due to the Carolina Bays and the wetlands in that area and the congestion along Highway 17. So if we were to install a larger scale permanent CNG facility, say 5,000 decatherms a day initially, expandable to 10 or 15, then that could kill several birds with one stone. It can allow us to support the demands in that area. It can prop up pressures in the wintertime without having to do additional improvements along Highway 17 from Highway 501 to North Myrtle Beach. But it also provides new gas molecules to the area, which means that's for example, if we were to eventually expand that facility to 10,000 decatherms a day, well, that's 10,000 decatherms a day that Witness Jackson doesn't have to procure upstream and then transport through those upstream pipelines and get all the way through our system. We'll have it delivered right to where the demand is in North Myrtle Beach. And so that's one situation where we would have a permanent, or at least a longer term facility for CNG, and it would be a permanently designed facility, not a mobile trailer like we're using today.
Okay. So at Sally and trucking the LNG in there, is that because there isn't much capacity available to send the gas to Sally and compress it there, or what?
The reason that we truck from Bushy Park to Sally today is because we do not have liquefaction capability at the Sally LNG plant, and there's several reasons for that. I was not here when that plant was designed, but number one is cost. It's a significant cost to add liquefaction. That is something that we have considered for a future improvement to Sally LNG, but today that's not a capability that it has. And then secondly, from what I understand, there's electrical grid limitations too. The liquefaction process would draw a large amount of electric power, and it's my understanding that the current electric system in that area would not support it. Of course, that could be upgraded, but those are the two reasons why we truck from Bushy Park to Sally.
Okay, so the liquefaction is electric power. It's not, you're not burning or compressing using natural gas.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have for right now.
Okay.
Vice Chair Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning to you.
Good morning.
And I guess either one of you could answer, what is Dominion's forecast for this winter? And I'm sure you all have discussed it. What do you see coming this winter? Cold, or you seem to talk about may not need it, may be mild. Are you expecting any extreme weather, or have y'all done a study on that, or what?
We have reviewed various forecasts, and in general terms, the forecasts for this winter that I've seen are slightly cooler than normal and probably wetter than normal, which is not a surprise seeing as how dry it's been around here the last several weeks. But we have no way of knowing on an individual short-term basis how cold it may or may not get. You could have a mild winter for the most part, but yet still experience an extreme cold event, and we've seen that in the past. But the probability of us experiencing what we call a design day, which would be weather that was equal to the coldest day we've seen on record, which I believe is December 1983, the odds of that are fairly low. The probability of that is low, but that's what we have to prepare for because it could occur. I have no way of knowing whether it will or will not, but that's what we prepare for.
Are you prepared for that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You talk about building up at North Myrtle Beach and, of course, the restrictions with all the wetlands and Carolina Bays, everything else. How, from North Myrtle Beach, how do you get your product southward? Or how do you get down to Myrtle Beach and Georgetown, Merle's Inlet, Surfside? How do you service that if your plant is up there?
Good question. So what actually happens is we have a town border station or city gate, depending on the nomenclature that you use, at a place called Riverneck Road, which is just outside of Florence. That's the extremity of Carolina Gas Transmission System in that area. That's where the gas changes custody from Carolina Gas Transmission to Dominion Energy. And then we take that through our River Neck Road transmission system from the Florence area through down near Kingsburg, and then eventually to Conway, and then eventually down Highway 501 to a station called Waterside, which is where near where Highway 501 and Highway 17 come together. From there, we have high pressure lines that go north and south to Murrells Inlet and north to North Myrtle Beach. And those have historically been the backbone of the system, and they have held up fine for many, many years. But when that system was first built, it was mainly to serve hotels and restaurants. Yeah. And over the last several decades, there's been tremendous commercial and residential growth in the area. So those high pressure, the main upstream long haul gas still comes from River Neck Road through our River Neck Road transmission system to Highway 501 at 17, and from there north and south on high pressure lines. But those high pressure lines, even though we have upgraded them to some extent, which has helped, it would require significant upgrade, especially going north, to meet the demands that we're seeing in the North Myrtle Beach Longs area. Apparently some people not from that area can move there and be within 20 or 30 miles of the beach and tell people where they're from that they now live at the beach. So we're seeing a lot of growth inland, the Longs area of Longs and Loris and that area. So that's where we're seeing a lot of growth. And the idea is to have that CNG station in that area to support just the growth that's there and supplement only when needed the high pressure line that goes north. So we do not intend to take gas from the CNG or even currently the temporary mobile LNG in North Myrtle Beach and send it anywhere else in the Grand Strand area. It's simply to support the localized growth on those coldest of days when the normal high pressure distribution system, which eventually feeds into our medium pressure distribution system, would get stressed. So really you can think of, and as far as our longer term plans, to have a more permanent, larger scale CNG facility in that area, you can almost think of that as it would serve the same function as what a very small LNG plant that's hooked up to our own system would serve. Today, our LNG facilities are large scale facilities that inject gas into CGT system, which eventually get to our system. But this would be stored gas in the compressed form, not the liquefied form, that would feed into our system only in that area where it's needed and only on the coldest of days. And it would not go to the rest of the Myrtle Beach area.
Thank you. That's a good answer.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Commissioner Justin Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. How are you all doing today?
Good.
Good. Mr. Glowhorn, I want to talk to you about the temporary facilities that you mentioned.
Yes,
when's
sir.
the last time that you all have used those?
We have used them. Well, the last time we used them was last winter, and we've used them off and on as needed at other times in the past. But we had, I would say last winter, due to the tremendous amount of growth that we've seen, we probably had more in use last winter than we have in the past, and really more than we would really like to see, which is why we have so many pipeline improvements on the books to get those off the system. But they are a good tool to use when needed.
Have they ever failed?
We have had issues with those. For example, we have had regulators to freeze up. So they're a pressurized vessel. They sense pressure downstream. When that regulator senses pressure below our set point, it starts to feed. And when that happens in extreme cold weather, you can have regulators fail because of freezing issues. Now, we have, in that case, we have mitigating factors. For example, we have installed SCADA monitoring points at each of these locations such that if we experience an operational issue, we'll be notified in our gas control room and they can dispatch our measurement and regulation personnel to respond to the site. We've also learned various things we can do to prevent those types of situations. So if you take the regulator freezing example, heat trace tape is one thing that can prevent that. So there are there is a potential for them not to work, but we have mitigating measures in place to prevent customer outages should they occur.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So just using that coldest day on the books, I think you said December 19th, 1983.
I believe that's correct.
So could you just walk me through what would happen if we were to experience that coldest day and one of the temporary facilities failed? What would happen next?
The first thing that would happen is we would notice, as I said, a pressure drop on our SCADA point, which is supervisory control data acquisition. So we have pressure monitors in the system that report back to our control room. If for some reason one of those temporary mobile facilities did not feed gas as it's planned, the result would be a drop in pressure. That would immediately result in an alarm in our gas control room, and it would result in us immediately dispatching technicians to the site to do what needs to be done. In many cases, there are alternate runs, so you can valve off a run maybe that's not working and turn on the other run. Sometimes that can be done automatically, remotely as well. So that would be our first response.
And how long will it take? Well, before I ask that question, let me ask this. If one of the temporary units failed, would that cause a disruption in service?
Not immediately. It should allow us time to get there. And in fact, I'm certain that if we saw forecasted temperatures that were approaching those design day conditions, we would more than likely have measurement and regulations technicians already dispatched to those locations just in case something were to go wrong, so that they would already be there to respond and not have to wake up early in that morning and travel to the site. So with it being so few, that would, I'm sure, be what we would do if we had a temperature forecast that low.
Okay. And any equipment or parts that they would need to replace, you guys have those in inventory? Is that something you have to special order?
They would have most of what they need on the truck, which would more than likely be just valve wrenches, because this equipment, like I said, has multiple runs, so that if one redundant equipment, if you will, so if one were to fail, they could valve that one off and just open an alternate run so that it would feed.
Right. So to me, it sounds like if another December 19th, 1983 occurs this winter, it sounds like you're ready for it.
We are prepared. We feel like we are prepared. Yes, sir.
Okay. You spoke about issues with permitting. Could you be more specific? What type of permits have you had issues with?
I think the biggest example would be the River Neck Road project. We currently are trying to replace the first leg of that River Neck Road transmission project that I was referring to, the piece that goes from River Neck Road town border towards Kingsburg. And I believe it's on the order of 14 to 16 miles of transmission main. We started the permitting process for that one over 3 years ago. We have seen extensive litigation in the courts by opposition groups. We have been successful in winning those appeals, but to be clear, they're not really they're not appealing our actions. They're appealing the decision of DHEC regarding our 401 water quality certification, which DHEC has said that our plans should be adequate to protect the water bodies, and that was appealed to administrative law court. We won that appeal. And then we had to wait on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to begin their wetlands permit. They did not want to review the 404 wetlands permit process until the 401 water quality certification issue was through litigation. So they finally did that and issued the 404 permit here in the last couple of weeks. So after 3 years, we finally have the major permits in hand that we need to begin that project, which is critical for meeting the customer demands in the Myrtle Beach area.
Okay, I want to talk to you a little bit about that. What impact has the litigation had on your ability to serve your customers in that area?
Thankfully, not much yet, but the clock is ticking. We identified the need for that project in advance of when it was needed. So we were able to start the permitting process early on, and we allowed for this type of permitting delay because we expected it, frankly. But if we do not get that pipeline project installed soon, then you could start to see lower pressures as that gas moves through the pipeline, as the demand increases. And if we're not able to increase the size of that pipeline system, then you could see pressure drops. That would require us to possibly have to utilize more temporary mobile CNG and LNG. But it would also allow us to replace a pipeline that was installed many, many decades ago, and I believe was installed in the 1950s, if I remember it right. So while there are pressure concerns, there's also age of pipeline issues, and we would like to get that older vintage pipeline replaced. But so far, Commissioner Williams, it has not impacted our ability to serve those customers. But if it's not done in the near future, we could see impacts. And so far, I would say it has, I guess I should back up, it has not impacted our commercial and residential customers, but there's a very large industrial customer, Nanya, that would really like to have more gas, but until we get this project completed, we're not able to accommodate their additional request for more gas.
Understood. And the obstacles that you're facing with that project, do you foresee there being more after the current litigation is resolved, or?
Well, the good news is, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. Is there more that you're concerned about, or do you believe once you get the green light, or once you resolve the pending litigation, you can start construction?
It's my understanding that for this project, all the automatic stays have been lifted. So even if there are additional appeals even if there's additional appeals or additional litigation, there's no automatic stays, so we can proceed once we decide to do so, based on the permits that we currently hold.
Okay. And do you have any idea when you would start that?
We have to, we're currently looking at pipe procurement schedules and how long would it take once we decide to begin construction, how long would it take for the critical path to happen, which would be delivery of the pipe. It looks like that's probably a 6-month lead time. So as we sit here today, this is subject to change based on internal conversations we may have as a company. But as of today, I think that it is in next year's budget to begin and complete that project.
Okay. Understanding your testimony, both of you all's testimony regarding the company's practices during the review period and the belief that it's reasonable and prudent, understanding that outside of the company's practices during the review period, are there any other concerns, observations that you've made that you think the commission needs to know about and consider?
I hate to ask this, but can you repeat that question one more time, please?
Do you have any concerns about your business? Because obviously we only know what you tell us. So
Right.
the things, for example, the permitting issues that you're facing.
Yes.
I wasn't tracking that. Maybe I should have been tracking it, but I wasn't tracking that. Is there anything else? Are there other challenges or concerns that the business is facing that you think the commissioners need to know about?
The one thing I would say, which I think the commission is aware of, is just the capacity constrained environment that South Carolina finds itself in. We do not have really virtually any natural gas production in our state. In fact, if you look at where most of the geologic natural gas comes from, it comes from the Northeast, the Midwest, as well as the Gulf of Mexico region, Texas, Oklahoma area. And if you look at the Southern Natural Pipeline, South Carolina sits at the far extremity of it. If you look at the Transco Pipeline, South Carolina sits in the middle of it. But if you look at where the gas is sourced from, which is on the extreme southwestern end and the extreme northeastern end, South Carolina, while we sit in the, the middle of that pipeline, it's essentially hydraulically the end of the pipeline from both directions. So any gas that comes from those locations has to get to us through upstream pipelines. And the permitting challenges that I mentioned for our pipelines, the main reason why we're starting to see that is because there aren't many interstate pipelines being built right now. They're having the same difficulties, if not more difficulties, on the interstate pipelines. So we have, as a nation, we have plenty of natural gas in the ground we have more than enough to meet our demands as well as the demands of people in other countries through overseas shipment of LNG. But getting that gas out of the ground and to where the demand is the challenge in our country, and a lot of that happens outside of our state's borders. It's interstate pipelines to go from those locations to bring the gas into South Carolina. Now, once you get the gas into South Carolina, as Witness Jackson will mention as far as our reserve margins, we have enough capacity on CGT's system that should meet our projected demands for several years out into the future. But the issue is, will we be able to procure additional upstream capacity to get that gas into Carolina Gas Transmission System? And if not, there are other things we can do. I mentioned that any of the CNG, for example, at this permanent site that we're planning for Myrtle Beach, that if it's, say, 5,000 decatherms a day, that's 5,000 decatherms a day we don't have to get from elsewhere. If we were to, at some point in the future, build additional LNG, then that on-system storage could be gas that we could utilize in times of high demand that we don't have to get from upstream sources. So there are things that we can do. There are technologies out there, but certainly the most reliable way to meet future capacity is through upstream long-haul pipelines. And the lack of that and the difficulty in procuring that and the length of time that it takes, as I'm sure y'all have heard from Witness Jackson several times, that timeline used to be on the order of 3 to 4 years. Now it's 7+ years. So I would say that's a challenge the Commission needs to be aware of. I would also say that and this has been testified to in previous dockets, but there's a request for RFP that's been issued for upstream pipelines to determine the feasibility of getting gas to serve an integrated resource between DESC, electric generation, and Santee Cooper. And the gas LDC has been part of those conversations as well. And if such a pipeline were to be able to be built and to get gas for that facility, then the hope is that the gas LDC may also get some capacity from that same pipeline. But we are also exploring contingency plans in case that does not happen.
Thank you. I appreciate the contingency planning. It seems as if in the face of those challenges that you all have several options in place just in case what you want to happen does not occur. So I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for sharing. Mr. Tan?
And I agree with Witness McGlohorn, excuse me, in regards to the capacity constraints, but outside of that, I don't have any additional concerns.
That's good to hear. Thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Caston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning.
Good morning.
I guess listening to that conversation relative to the challenge that any challenges that the Commission should be aware of, it seems, if I understood you correctly, on the interstate level and intrastate level, litigation, you know, a lot of litigation to it. What's the purpose? Do you know? Is it to just stop the gas lines, or is there something else? Is it safety concerns? I mean, what's the issue?
Commissioner Caston, I can't speak to their ultimate motives. There's different theories on that, but I think it's from the issues that we have heard from, it is, I think maybe some anti-fossil fuel sentiment, but also there's land concerns, land right concerns. In the case of River Neck Road, for example, it's along an existing pipeline corridor, but we are attempting to, or we have procured, I should say, 10 additional feet, primarily to allow for construction of the new pipeline. So there's land concerns. There are environmental concerns, which are what's being primarily challenged in the most recent court proceedings. Feel like we have a very favorable ruling from the judge in the most recent appeal, We feel like our environmental plans are very solid. We feel like DHEC has agreed with that based on the issuance of the 401 certification. We feel like the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has agreed with our plans, which is reflective in their issuance of the 404, but I guess some entities don't think that DHEC's review was complete enough, or some groups may not think that the Army Corps of Engineers review was complete enough. But I think it could be numerous things, and I wouldn't want to try to say what the ultimate goals are.
Understand. But what I'm hearing is, for whatever reason, these are mitigating factors that have extended timelines to get projects through the permitting process to begin construction. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. The permitting process itself has maybe not been at warp speed, but has been within what we expected, and it has been reasonable, I would say, by the permitting agencies. It has been the largest delays have come from the litigation that's occurred afterwards and the challenges of those permits that have been issued by those agencies.
Understand. And looking at your responsibilities again, you do a lot.
Well, I oversee a lot of people that do a lot, but we have a team that takes care of, we have a good team.
Good answer. Engineering, construction, system planning. Relative to planning, does the company perform like in-depth projections, when considering supply, storage, transmission, distribution? That's part of your planning process?
Yes, sir, we do. We have a resource planning group that looks at all of our entire system, as well as on an area point by area point basis. And the area point is just an aggregation of our 110-ish individual city gates or town borders. They're aggregated by Carolina Gas Transmission into 9 area points. So that group looks at each of those area points and projects that design day demand out for a period of, I think, 15 to 20 years, 18 years maybe. And so then we look at those projected demands and evaluate that against our ability to serve those demands.
And I'm not trying to get the minutia of your business, but are those demands, when they look at those areas, do you look at like census population projections or industrial thing? How do you generally determine those?
Well, generally, that group, I don't know all their sausage making secrets, but I do know that they refer to census data. They refer to a lot of published population data and growth data, but they also meet with our operations, engineering, and sales team to see, does this look reasonable? Do you agree with these projections? So it's really a collaborative effort between our resource planning group, who utilizes various tools that they have, as well as just subject matter expertise that, like, for example, our gas sales team may have, and almost as a reasonable check for their numbers. So it's something that we all agree to for those future year projections.
And in your planning periods, is that like 5-year, 10-year, 15? I mean, what increments how far out are you looking?
Yeah. Well, we have we look out during the entire 18-year period to some extent, mainly looking at upstream capacities. As far as our actual system, we have to submit a 10-year capital budget every year, so that requires us to have some idea of what projects we may be planning for a 10-year period. So there's that, which it gets fairly detailed in the immediate years. For example, we may have a large list of individual projects identified for 2024, for example. But if you look at the budget 10 years from now, it may have only the major projects we expect, because we don't have the granularity with which to know all the small projects. So you'll see a lot more unassigned budget dollars, say 10 years from now versus next year. But we do have a capital budget with individual projects listed for a period of 10 years. And then we also have our computerized hydraulic model where we take those projected loads by area point, and then we work with our sales team to see, okay, well, if we said that Charleston's going to grow by X amount next year, where exactly are those houses going to be at? And that's intelligence that our sales team gives us. And we will put that into our model, into what we call our growth model. And that may not go out 10 years. It may go out, say, 5 years. So that gets into analysis of system pressures, identifying individual projects that we need to do to keep up with the growth. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say there's a 0 to 5 year plan where we have growth models in our computerized growth models. We have a 10-year plan where we look at capital projects, and we have an 18-year plan where we look at, I guess, at a macro scale, projected demands and compare that against upstream capacities.
It does, because I was thinking in terms of like updates, like do you look at it every year or at some frequency to see, okay, this is what we thought, this is what it is, are we tracking?
Right, every year we update.
Okay.
We work with resource planning to update those numbers every year, and in fact, we just finished updating our computerized hydraulic model for this coming winter. We just finished that a few weeks ago, so it's an annual update.
And the reason I was asking those things, as I look through the testimony, and you're talking about the 16% growth in the Myrtle Beach area, that Grand Strand area, 16 to 20%, I think you said.
Yes, sir.
And I can't remember what the overall was, 3?
Overall is just under 4, about 3.9%.
Something like that. But I was thinking about that, and I know those things just don't happen overnight, but at the same time, some things can take us by surprise. So I guess what I was thinking about was, okay, when was this an epiphany that Dominion had, or have you seen this coming for some time? And it's just a problem now. I mean, relative to those high growth areas.
Say the growth. Well, if you take Myrtle Beach as an example, we have seen that growth be very high for many years now, and I can think going back as far as 2015. I remember laying out a plan to upgrade the transmission system going from River Neck Road to Highway 501 in Myrtle Beach. And in fact, we've already replaced several sections of that transmission system. There are really only 2 sections left to be replaced. One is a 6-inch, a couple miles of 6-inch pipe that goes under the Waccamaw River. And then there's the River Neck Road project. Other than that, we have systematically, over the last, I would say, 8 to 10 years, replaced various sections of that transmission system to keep up with the growth. And we didn't do it all at once, because that would have resulted in extreme expense and probably would have had upward pressure on customer rates. So what we try to do is match the growth as it occurred, so that the new customers could support that investment and keep customer rates in a reasonable range. But we have seen that growth in Myrtle Beach, for example, for at least the last decade, and have planned for it for that long. But we can't plan for everything when it's growing 16%. So we do sometimes have to move quickly on projects.
And, thinking about the CNG in that area, or those temporary things, in other words, you knew you needed to do something sometime back, but this was the stopgap measure before you, I guess, do the ultimate thing. How long have you?
Yes, sir.
How long have you known that you were going to need to do some temporary?
I would say for Myrtle Beach, we've known it for the last 2 or 3, 4 years, I would say. And a lot of it has to do with, there are permitting issues, but there's also just the prudency of it and thinking about customer rates. For example, if we could solve it to where we did not need any CNG in North Myrtle Beach, but it would require an extremely expensive project going through extremely difficult to construct areas, which would drive up the cost. You would be looking at significant amounts of board pipe, and we would be doing that for something that might happen in terms of a design day. So in our opinion, it was much more economical and in the best interest of our customers to put a temporary solution, a lower cost temporary solution in place to bridge that gap between the time when we can put something permanent in place. And the permanent solution could be, we evaluated the expensive pipeline improvements going from Highway 501 Waterside up to North Myrtle Beach, and we did replace some of that pipe. But we got to a point where the next section to be replaced was going to be extremely expensive. And compared to temporary mobile CNG and even permanent CNG, we just felt like that would create too much upward pressure on rates to proceed with a project like that when a CNG facility would work just fine.
I understand. Makes sense. And relative to the growth in general, I guess system-wide, is that being driven primarily by residential, commercial, industrial, or is one above the other?
I would say all of the above. Residential, our growth rate that you've seen in my testimony, 3.9%. I'm not going to say there's not another gas utility in the country our size that has a higher growth rate, but if there is, I'm not aware of it. If you look at all of our, the other Dominion LDCs, they're somewhere around the 2 to 2.5 growth rate range. That's consistent with most of the utilities that we see. So part of that is through the efforts of our sales team. Obviously, what we're doing in that area is working, but also it's just the tremendous population growth and the demand for natural gas that people have in this state. So residential is a big piece of that. And then along with residential, that brings commercial. And then there's obviously a huge amount of industrial growth taking place in our state, and there probably would be more if we had more upstream capacity. But I would say it's all three. It's residential and commercial certainly, but there's also been industrial growth taking place as well, and we've been fortunate to serve a lot of those new industries too.
Thank you. A couple other quick questions. Going back to the CGT line, do you envision, I guess, any future transmission lines tying into that, or is that, when you say, in essence, Dominion owns 90 to 100% of that capacity, and I'm assuming there's still a lot of available capacity that you own. Are there any plans to tie into that line, or is there anything that needs to be done relative to, I guess, improving your infrastructure?
Well, as part of the RFP that Witness Jackson may reference in her testimony, we have asked for proposals as to what it would take to move various amounts of gas to different town borders, Aiken, Columbia, Florence, Charleston, maybe even River Neck Road. And we're kind of in the process of evaluating those responses to see what the most economical solution may be. But I think the biggest thing to improve CGT system is for more upstream capacity to get gas into the CGT system, but also possible expansions on CGT system itself. So I think we're looking at all of the above. We're looking at ways to get more gas into CGT system, which is what we call receipt capacity, and then also more delivery capacity from CGT to our various places to keep up with the growth.
And thinking about the LNG facilities, Dominion doesn't use, well, let me ask the question. Is this only for serving local distribution, or do you export or sell any of that?
Right. Our LNG facilities are only for use by the LDC, so it effectively acts similar to what an upstream pipeline would. So our contracts on Carolina Gas Transmission have two components. You have a receipt obligation. We have a receipt obligation to get a certain amount of gas into CGT system, and then they have a matching delivery obligation. So once we put gas into their system, where is it going to be delivered? And the majority of the receipt into CGT system comes from upstream pipelines, which would be Transco, Southern Natural. But some of the upstream receipt comes from our LNG plants. So we deliver those volumes from our LNG facilities into CGT system, just as if they were upstream pipelines. And then they deliver that to us downstream for use by the LDC only, and only for our firm customers. So, so it's going to be utilized on those colder days to serve firm residential, firm commercial, and firm industrial if needed.
I appreciate it. You seem to have a firm grip and grasp of your system.
We think about it a lot.
Well, that's comforting to know. And one question for you, Ms. Smith, because you look bored out of your mind. And let me, and I don't blame you. You know, based on the cost of gas factors filed in a docket 2006 5G, the commodity cost of gas factor has decreased over the past 12 months, but the demand cost factor has increased approximately 20% for residential customers. Would you kind of explain what's been driving that increase in demand cost?
And are you asking since 2006?
Well, I guess maybe in the last 12 months. I mean, if you can go back to 2006, fine, but I would think in the last 12 months would be sufficient, just for my edification.
So there primarily two factors that have contributed to the increase in our demand cost over the last, this kind of goes back over the last maybe 2 years or so, but there were some changes in the contracted capacity. One is our Transco upstream demand. We added 90,000 decatherms beginning January, 2021. And that added $21.1 million to our demand cost. And then most recently, we have included the MVP demand cost into our forecast. And so in our July 2023 forecast, we picked up the MVP charges beginning January. And then most recently, there was a recent notification that the in-service date has been shifted some for MVP. So we have now shifted that in-service date in our PJ forecast to April of 2024. And so that adds roughly $1.4 million per month that it's getting included into the forecast. So those two items in the last 2 years or so have increased the demand cost for customers.
I appreciate it. That was very helpful. And you'd mentioned the MVP project, and I can't remember if it was in Ms. Jackson's testimony or one of y'all's or someone else's, where it's still talking about that being completed by the end of the year. That's like 60 days. Do you know if that's still accurate?
Witness Jackson can give you a specific date, I think, better than I can. However, last that I had heard, they were delaying that until early 2024, and it may even be mid-2024, but I would certainly ask that question of Witness Jackson when she testifies.
Well, the reason I was thinking about that, because you had said, I thought I just heard you say that cost you're looking at in April 2024, is that commodity cost, is that part of that reason because of the delay?
Yes, because our forecast is a forward-looking 12-month forecast. So we pushed back those costs to begin in April. We initially had them starting in January, but I think maybe 2 weeks ago or so, there was some information that was provided in terms of the in-service date for MVP being first quarter of 2024. And so based on that, we pushed that in service, or we started adding that cost in our forecast beginning April of 2024. And we made that adjustment in our most recent PGA filing for November.
Thank you so much. I know this is going to break your heart, but I have no more questions.
Ms. Smith, I just want to ask a question about this last series of questions from Mr. Caston related to the Mountain Valley pipeline. When you say you push those forecasts back, that's just the forecast. That's not impacting the actual commodity or demand, the cost of gas at the moment. Is that right?
So it does. So our forecast is a forward-looking 12-month forecast. And so to the extent that the January start date was in that forward-looking 12-month period, then we would pick up $1.4 million each month beginning January of 2024. So currently, our most recent update in November, we started those costs in April 2024 instead of January. So we pushed the start date for those costs in the forecast.
Well, all I'm asking is in the amount that will be in the charges for the gas starting in January, there won't be inclusion of that 1.4 million per month. Is that?
No, starting in January of 2024.
Yes, they will be or will not be.
There will be, because our forecast is forward-looking. So our November 2023 forecast is a forward-looking forecast. So we're projecting costs from November 2023 through October of 2024. And so because we've included the MVP cost starting in April 24, then we've got April 2024 through October of 2024.
But
those costs are being included in our forecast.
It would be 1.4 million starting in April, not starting in January. Is that right?
Correct. Yes,
and
correct.
And then if it gets pushed out again, y'all would redo the forecast beginning on that start date.
We would make adjustments to the start of those costs in the forecast.
I reckon my question is on the amount of how often do you recalculate? That's monthly, isn't it?
We calculate our forecast each month, and to the extent that any of the factors for any of the class change by more than 4 cents, then we adjust the rates.
So I reckon what I'm asking, since you've already adjusted for in the November, that the start date's been pushed to April, the cost of gas in January would not include 1.4 million for January, February, March.
Oh, you're asking actual costs. That's correct. The actual cost would not.
And if Mountain Valley actually comes online, there's no further push out in April, that's where the 1.4 million would actually be included for the customers.
As actuals.
What I'm getting at, there won't be a charge on those months before the Mountain Valley pipeline comes online.
Well, there is.
Well, I mean, the months where it's not online. I mean, I understand the forward part, okay?
So we average out the factor that we charge over the upcoming 12 months. And so our November forecast that we just filed rates for, I think on Monday, does include, if my math is right, from April 2024 through October of 2024. So it has that $1.4 million each month that's included in that forecast.
Okay. All right. I think that helps. I may have some more questions.
And that helps to smooth out those costs and the charges that we're charging customers.
Okay. I may have some more questions, but I saw Commissioner Carol Lee Williams' light on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. I don't know. Ms. Smith, I'm going to start with you. And good to see you. And thank you for all the education that you provided. On your exhibit number 2, you are talking about the commodity cost per therm. And this, well, at 45 cents and change, projected over the next 12 months. Is the actual cost less than this?
So what's shown in the column 1, those are projected costs. So we're projecting what the commodity cost would be from September 2023 through August of 2024. And in column 4, that's saying this is what the commodity cost needs to be in order to zero out the under collection balance over the next 12 years. And so we're projecting what the commodity cost would be in column 1 because we don't know what the actuals are.
I think I heard you say years.
Yeah.
Did you
I'm
mean
sorry.
Months?
Oh, did I say 12 years instead of 12 months? I may have said, if I said 12 years, it should have said 12 months. Yes, thank you for that correction.
So what, in months like November where it's higher, where the actual projected cost is higher, then that explains why there's a lower cost in some months, but in certain months like November and December, it's higher and it zeroes out, is what you just said. Is that correct? Did I follow that?
Can you repeat that question?
Absolutely.
I'm not sure that I was following.
So I'm looking at column 1, and I'm seeing you're saying those are actual numbers, and they're very actual projected numbers, and they're, some are higher than column 2 and some are lower. And what I think you're saying is that zeroes out to an average of the 45 cents and change.
And so there are a couple different factors here.
Okay.
So this exhibit is showing, with this commodity cost that's in column 2, our under collection balance at the end of August will zero out over the next 12 months.
August of 24 or 23?
August of 24. So this is
Okay.
forward looking. So we're starting with our
Right.
August 23
Right.
balance, and then we're looking forward for 12 months.
And is this reflective of lower natural gas costs that are anticipated?
So each month we do receive forecasted NYMEX prices from our gas supply team. And so the NYMEX prices that we use are those forecasted gas prices. And so in column 1, what you're seeing there are the forecast of what the NYMEX prices are expected to be.
And how do those compare with the past 12 months?
For the past 12 months, so we are beginning to see the natural gas costs decline compared to the most recent 12 months. So they are declining slightly.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think that's all I have for you. Mr. McLaughlin, I do have a few additional questions. On page 10 of your testimony, you talked about key investments that you all have made. And I'm just curious which ones have been most significant from your perspective.
Of the list that was in my testimony, which is a non-exhaustive list, but it's a list of various improvements, a sampling of improvements we've done. I would say for sure the 14,500 feet of 12-inch steel pipeline that replaced existing 1960s vintage 6-inch steel pipeline along Highway 501 in Myrtle Beach, that was a big project. In fact, going back to the question that Commissioner Justin Williams asked, how is it that we haven't had major impacts by not completing the River Neck Road project yet? This is the same pipeline system, just further downstream, closer to Myrtle Beach. So the completion of that project is what allowed us to absorb the delays associated with the River Neck Road project. So without a doubt, with all the growth that we've seen in Myrtle Beach, that one would be one of the biggest ones, I think, on this list.
And you've really answered this, but from the perspective of this list, what has driven these needs more than anything else? Is it residential? Is it commercial? Is it industrial?
For the ones specifically listed here, it's primarily residential and commercial, mostly residential, I would say, with some commercial. I think I referenced one of them was to a new school, but most of these are serving new residential subdivisions and then the following commercial load that usually comes along with those subdivisions once they get established. However, we did serve some new industrial customers. There's two in particular two that I can think of in the Bishopville area, for example. I think one was Upcycle and one was an Upcycle Industry, I think is the name of one of them, and then the other one was another commercial customer, but both in Bishopville. So we have served new industrial customers in the past as part of the review period as well.
Okay. And this is a selfish question, but you talked about the CNG temporary provision on James Island. Is that something that you've provided in the past on James Island, and where is it on James Island?
The one that we're doing on James Island, I think that's this year only. I don't recall us having one on James Island before, and I'm not exactly sure of the exact location. I'm sure that some of our engineers have the exact address, but I'm not exactly sure of the specific location.
What kind of is location likely to be? Are the operations that happen on the site something that residents could be concerned about? Or do you site it in such a way that it's far enough away from residential communities?
Well, the one thing, we have to comply with all the NFPA regulations and all the safety requirements. So we would comply with all those types of siting requirements and be as safe as we meet all those safety requirements. But it's not something that people typically want to see. I think that in Blythewood, for example, the one we had there got a little bit of media attention last year because some residents wanted it somewhere else, and we removed it as soon as the winter was over last year. And again, we have a permanent solution in place so that we don't need that in Blythewood anymore after this winter. So we definitely have the public in mind, and we try to put these things in places where they're not noticed. Typically, a lot of times they may be in the very back of a newly developed subdivision, maybe where lots haven't been built out yet or not. But we also have to make sure that they're strategically located such that they can support the part of the system where the support is needed. So sometimes that limits us as to how inconspicuous of a location we can pick. But we certainly keep the public in mind, and we really want to be like a referee in a football game. We want to be unnoticed to the extent that we can be. And we just want to provide that safe, reliable service 24/7, just like somebody flipping on a water spigot or a water faucet. We want them to be able to turn on their heat or their water heat or their cooktop and not have to think about where the gas comes from.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Shifting gears, during Winter Storm Elliott, did Dominion experience any freezing of gas system components or instruments?
We did. We were able to respond to those, and that's how we learned. We did learn some lessons, such as the need to put the SCADA systems in place, the need to put heat tracing in place, and things of that nature. But they did not result. None of those issues with any of the CNG facilities resulted in any customer outages, even in the December cold snap from 2022. We were able to rectify those situations before they impacted the system.
And I didn't mean to be just asking about CNG, so is there an answer for the broader?
For Winter Storm Elliott?
Mm-hmm. From a gas perspective.
Right. So as indicated in my testimony, overall, from a macro perspective, the system performed very well overall. We did not have any major areas of the system that were a concern. I will say that some parts of Myrtle Beach got a little bit lower than we were projecting in our models, and we found that the culprit there was a partially closed valve. So that was, but again, it did not result in any major issues or any customer outages, so that had since been corrected. The only real issue that we experienced during Winter Storm Elliott was the loss of 6 individual customers in the Elgin area and Wood Creek Farms, and that was primarily due to our methodology of applying load to models. So what we typically do, say in an area like Columbia or Lexington or Myrtle Beach, we know from the forecasted demands how much gas is going to be flowing through a certain area. So then we apply that to our model, almost using a shotgun type approach in those larger areas. But what we learned was in somewhere like Elgin, you can't take the projected load and disperse it amongst, say, an entire zip code or something like that, because there may be a very small geographic area where that load's actually occurring. So what we have learned since then is that we need to work with our sales team and make sure that where we're projecting this load in the model is at the most likely places where houses are going to be built, especially for a system like a smaller system like what we saw in Elgin. The shotgun approach typically works for the larger areas because houses are going to be built, and they're going to be built in a fairly dispersed pattern in that area. So we don't have to be quite as granular, but if you have somewhere like Elgin, where most of the new growth is coming in one subdivision along one or two streets in the very back of that subdivision, that's important to know, and that was the big lesson that we learned from that event.
I have one more question for you. You talk about design day conditions and operations, on Winter Storm Elliott, and you note that Dominion did not reach the design day conditions, but you set a new peak for gas. Could you explain that relationship for me?
Yes. So design day conditions would be how much gas demand we would expect from our customers on the coldest day that we would expect to have. So that that should, in theory, result in a total throughput that's much higher than what we even saw last year. But the peak throughput that I mentioned in my testimony is simply that. It's in terms of the amount of gas that flowed through our system, that was the most that it's ever been. But the weather conditions were not the coldest that it's ever been. So had we experienced the coldest weather conditions that we designed for and that we planned for, that peak day throughput volume that we experienced last year would have been much higher than it even was. But even though it wasn't the coldest day that we designed for, it was still the most gas that had flowed through our system, and that's primarily because of the growth we've experienced over the years. Does that answer the question?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I was just making sure that that answered your question.
Could it also have been, I think we've heard testimony from other utilities that the wind was a really big factor in some areas and caused, even though the temperature was such and such, there was a greater impact?
Well, the wind can definitely have an impact. A home has a heat envelope, so if you don't have a lot of wind, then it's not going to blow that heat envelope away. But if you have a lot of wind, then it can cause the heaters to come on more. And then it's also just the way the temperature is perceived by people. If it's windy outside and cold, people perceive it to be colder, and they're going to turn the thermostat to a higher temperature. But yes, our gas procurement team works with our gas control group, and they look at things like not only the temperature, the average temperature for the day, for the gas day, 10 a.m. to 10 a.m., but they do also consider things like wind speed, also the day of the week. Is it a weekday? Is it a weekend? Is school in or is school out? Those are all things that get considered to come up with that daily forecasted demand that then our gas procurement group has to nominate for on the upstream pipelines to make sure we get it delivered. So all those things are factored in.
Thank you. And you brought back to my mind what December of 1982 was like.
I remember that day.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you. I have a couple of follow-up questions. Kind of these other commissioners have made me think about some things. In connection with the appeal down there in the Myrtle Beach area, I would assume that it's still possible for the appeal to go higher. Do you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it just kind of depends on where those people that are opposing choose to spend their money, I guess.
That is correct. I suppose that they would have to evaluate how strong they think the case that they have may or may not be, and if they choose to fight that battle or fight another one. But we feel confident that we have a plan in place that will withstand legal scrutiny. We feel like the permits that have been issued by DHEC and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers are solid and will withstand scrutiny. So it is our opinion that no matter what additional litigation occurs, especially with no automatic stay in place, that we would have the ability to go ahead and proceed with construction should we so decide. And we feel like there's a low likelihood, although it's possible, but a low likelihood of future appeals to stop that project.
Okay, so we as commissioners have been asked, what's going on in terms of how do we plan for growth and development. And it seems to me like maybe an area that also needs attention is these areas, these departments of the state that are responsible for doing these studies. And I'm just really kind of asking. So it's important to make sure that those departments are fully funded so that they can conduct these studies in a manner that is defensible. Would you agree with that?
In terms of the permitting agencies?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It's very important for them to be fully funded so that they can review our permit applications in a timely manner and provide a thorough review, and then issue the permits, and then also issue the permits in such a way they would withstand any type of legal scrutiny.
Okay. So if or when the Mountain Valley Pipeline ends up providing additional gas, is there a projection as to how long we'll be in good shape, so to speak, for growth and development?
There are projections, and I would defer to Witness Jackson on a lot of that because she has some of that data specifically in her exhibits. But it's important to note that the Mountain Valley Pipeline project, well, first of all, let me say that's another good example of the permitting delays, because as Witness Jackson will probably testify, that project was supposed to be in service a long time ago, and it's been substantially complete for a long time, but permitting delays and litigation has held that project up for much longer than it was planned to. But we're confident it's going to be completed eventually. But what that project will do is it won't give us any more capacity on, say, CGT system. What it will do, as I understand it, and again, I will defer to Ms. Jackson's expertise here, but as I understand it, the Mountain Valley Pipeline project will take gas from where it comes out of the ground and get it into Transco's pipeline, so that then Transco can move that gas to CGT, and that it can so that we can have sufficient receipts into CGT system to deliver gas to us. So in effect, you have to look at these pipelines as almost like stacks of pancakes, and we have to make sure that we not only have adequate capacity on our system once it gets into our system to serve the demand, but we have to have enough gas coming into CGT's system so that then they can deliver that gas to us. And then likewise, it means we have to have enough capacity on Transco and Southern Natural, and that's where Mountain Valley Pipeline comes in. It helps to make sure we have enough gas, and it gives us options for how to get gas into Transco's pipeline so that we can then get it into CGT and then get it to our customers on our distribution system.
Okay. And so you talked about the backup plan is potentially some more LNG. And so just given that that backup plan might be very important, has anything started in terms of locating potential LNG plants and acquiring potential right-of-ways, and what sort of permitting might be needed if that plan becomes what needs to happen?
Yes, we have started to look at that, and I will say as part of the general rate case proceeding, one of the conditions of the stipulated agreement was that we would complete and submit to the commission within 1 year a capacity study, and we're planning to do that, and we're evaluating things now to that end. But there are many options. We are not at a point yet where we have settled on any one option, but the options would include upstream pipeline capacity through upstream projects, and I mentioned the RFP that we've submitted to explore options there. Yes, permanent LNG is an option. Our sister company in Utah just put one into service. Our sister company in North Carolina is in the process of performing preliminary designs now to build a similar LNG facility in North Carolina to add to their existing LNG assets. And they're doing that in conjunction with hoping for additional upstream capacity through Mountain Valley Pipeline. So I do think that permanent LNG is something that we are definitely going to look at and explore. And our company would have the expertise after building 2 similar plants, both in Utah and North Carolina in recent years. But there's other technologies too. There's propane air technology where you can have propane and you blend it with air and then that can blend into natural gas and supplement your capacity. Renewable natural gas is another one. There are landfills and wastewater treatment plants in the state that have reached out to us and asked us about gas quality standards. How would they need to treat that gas in order to get it to pipeline quality standards? And also, what would our interconnect requirements be? So we have been working to develop those guidelines for potential RNG producers. And just to put that in perspective, it's not huge volumes, but it would be enough. If we took our top 15 potential RNG prospects that are near our gas system today in the state, top 15 landfills and wastewater treatment plants that are in close proximity to our service territory, if we were to hook all them up hypothetically, that would offset the growth of, say, a year's worth of organic residential and commercial growth. So it's not insignificant. So there's that. There's also the prospect, like I mentioned earlier, of permanent CNG facilities. So there's a lot of things that we can do. There's a utility in New York today on Long Island that runs 100 to 200 CNG tanker trucks per day on a cold day. I don't anticipate us doing that in South Carolina. I certainly hope we never have to do that, but that just goes to show that even if long-haul upstream pipeline capacity, for whatever reason, does not come to fruition, there are other tools in the toolbox that can be utilized, and they will all be studied as part of the capacity study that we'll submit to the commission over the next year.
Okay, so that was kind of where I was getting to, was a plan that we can see, and sounds to me like, from what you just now said, that will include such things as potential LNG or compressed natural gas or whatever. Is that correct?
I'm certain that it will include an evaluation of all those options. As far as what our recommended approach will be, we'll have to wait till we conclude the analysis, but we will certainly be looking at all those options and trying to pick the one or possibly an all of the above approach to see what's best for our customers.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Commissioner Caston?
Just one. And actually, it's in Ms. Jackson's testimony, where she talks about Dominion will require additional interstate pipeline capacity in order to meet future design forecast. Do you know when that is? Is that next year? Is that 5 years? Is that?
Well, if it were additional upstream capacity, there are small things that upstream pipelines can do, such as compressor upgrades, maybe piping configuration upgrades that we have seen in the past that have created small incremental capacity, say of the 5, 10, 15,000 decatherm a day range. But in order to get large volumes, 50, 100,000 decatherms a day and above, it's more than likely going to require either a large-scale LNG facility or upstream pipelines. And as we've seen in previous testimonies from Witness Jackson, I think at one time 4 years was kind of what we planned for, from the time we initiate those conversations to the time when the new pipeline comes online. But that timeline has been expanded with what we've seen from Mountain Valley Pipeline and other pipeline projects to, I would say, 5 to 7 years. I think Witness Jackson would agree to that. So what we have to do is make sure that we're planning well enough in advance that we can request that additional capacity and make sure that it comes online when we need it to. And if it doesn't, that we have other contingency plans in place to bridge the gap until it does come online, like some of those other options I mentioned could do that.
But by upstream capacity, what you're talking about now, you're talking about the interstate.
Yes, sir.
Lines. And still the first question.
Okay.
What can be done about that? We're limited. It sounds like a state utility issue. What can be done about making that better? Other than the things you just said.
Right. Well, the things that we as a gas LDC have control over is just our plan and making sure that we evaluate all the options at our disposal and that we execute those options in the most prudent manner possible. That's what we can control. Now, I do think that there's some policy things that our state can implement. There's some policy things that maybe our nation can implement, but those are outside the scope of things that we can influence, at least directly as a gas LDC. There are things that we can influence indirectly with that, and we can make sure that all the policymakers are aware of the issues so that they can get behind the needs of the state of South Carolina, which I have seen evidence of that recently in other legislative committees. But what we can do as a gas LDC is make sure that we stay on top of our plan and make sure that we have contingency plans in place and we utilize all the tools that are available to us, and then hope that the state and national policy makers are able to implement the type of change that's needed for our state and our nation to prosper.
And Dominion understands that's outside of our scope too, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Carolee Williams?
Thank you. I have one question. When you were talking, Mr. McLaughlin, when you were talking about the capacity study that's you're getting ready to do, and when you talk about various tools in the toolbox, are those tools and options that are going to help you with the scout industries, or are they going to help you with incremental residential growth, or both?
I would say both. Now, with respect to Scout, I don't know if they're going to be using gas or not, but even if they don't, certainly some spinoff companies that support them will. But I would think it would be all the above. We need to look at our residential, commercial, and industrial projections and plan as best we can. Now, one thing that makes industrial projections difficult, and one reason why I don't believe, at least, we have firm industrial growth included in our resource planning estimates. Residential and commercial growth is more organic. You know, okay, the Columbia area is going to grow probably at X amount. You know, the Myrtle Beach area is going to grow at a certain amount in terms of residential and commercial growth. But industrials, suppose there's one large industrial economic development prospect that's going to locate in South Carolina, and they want 20,000 decatherms of firm gas per day. Well, where do we propose to put that? Do we allocate that to the Columbia area point? Do we put it in the Aiken area point? Do we put it in the River Neck Road area point? And so that's what makes projecting the industrial load difficult. And that's why that's, at least to my knowledge, why our resource planning group only projects residential and commercial demands. And that's also why when one of these large industrial customers does site in our state, it's a great thing for our state, but it creates an issue for our pipeline capacity, because we probably, if you look at some of the largest economic development projects that have landed in our state in recent years, we probably did not have those in our projections because they materialized in a relatively short amount of time. And when that happens, even if we have a relatively large reserve margin where we're accounting for residential and commercial growth, one large industrial customer can take up a big piece of whatever that reserve happens to be and very quickly put us in a situation where our reserve margin gets substantially lower. And if we knew of a good way to know exactly where our next largest industrial customers were going to come over the next 5 to 10 years, we would certainly include that in our plan. And we have some hints. We know where the state's largest industrial parks are. We know where land is, but it's often very difficult to tell which exact industry is going to come. Do they want firm or uninterruptible gas? What type of pressures do they need, and what kind of flow rates do they need? That's just nearly impossible to predict. We have some indicators, but we just can't be that precise with it.
But you're testifying, if I heard you right, that from the capacity planning study that you're undertaking, you will be looking at, maybe not with specificity, industrial needs, but general ways to address.
Yes, industrial needs will be part of the evaluation.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Gissendaner, any redirect?
No redirect.
Okay. Mr. McLaughlin, Ms. Smith, thank you very much for your testimony. You may stand down.
Thank you.
We've been going a little over an hour and a half. We're going to take a 10-minute break until 11:50. Let me just give you an idea where we are. We have a commission business meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. today. We'll go to approximately 1 o'clock today, maybe a little after. We need to give staff a break and let them reset for the business meeting, and we should be through with the business meeting by 2:45 or 3, and we'll adjourn and pick this back up after the business meeting. I don't see us finishing in an hour, let's put it that way. So just to give y'all an idea. But we're in recess until 11:50. Good, still morning. Good morning and welcome back to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina as we continue in hearing number 2023-5-G. All commissioners are present in the hearing room with the exception of Commissioner Irvin, who's on sick leave this morning. And we are ready for our next panel. Mr. Burgess, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. The company calls Rose Jackson and Dr. Hua Fang to the stand. They're already seated at the table in front of us. So, ladies, if you'll be prepared to have the oath administered to you. I'll start with you, Ms. Jackson. Would you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Rose Moore Jackson.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Dominion Energy Services Incorporated as the Director of Fuel Commodities.
And have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your direct supervision and pre-filed in this docket direct testimony consisting of 18 pages?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any updates to your direct testimony?
Yes, sir. I have one update and one correction.
All right. Would you please instruct the commission and ORS to the page number and the line number that requires an update?
Yes, sir. The first is an update on page 5, line 22. It's related to the Mountain Valley Pipeline. The company filed a letter with the Public Service Commission on October 23rd of this year. So on page 5, line 22, strike the year 2023 and replace it with first quarter 2024.
All right, Ms. Jackson, do you also have any corrections to your testimony?
Yes, sir, I do. I have one correction on page 16, line 19. If you will strike 58 million and replace it with 53 million. The 58 million included allocated losses to deaths from South Carolina Pipeline.
Are there any other corrections or updates required of your testimony, Ms. Jackson?
No, sir, there are not.
If I ask you all the questions contained in your direct testimony as the answers have been updated and corrected, would your answers be the same?
Yes, sir.
Chair Belzer, we would move into the evidence of record, the pre-filed direct testimony of Rose Jackson as updated and as corrected, as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Jackson's pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as it has been updated and corrected from the stand.
Ms. Jackson, do you have any exhibits attached to your testimony?
Yes, sir, I do.
Are there any changes or corrections or updates required of those exhibits?
No, sir.
Chair Belzer, we would move into the record the exhibits attached to Rose Jackson's direct testimony, which consist of RMJ1 and RMJ2, and ask that they be marked and included in the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Ms. Jackson's exhibits accompanying her pre-filed direct testimony marked as RMJ1 and RMJ2 will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 2 and received into the evidence of this case.
Thank you, Chair Belzer. Ms. Jackson, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, sir.
Would you please deliver that at this time?
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Belzer. Still morning. Chair Belzer and members of the Commission. My testimony discusses the company's portfolio of natural gas supply. During the review period, the company's gas asset portfolio relied upon all 4 gas supply options available to it, namely wellhead gas supply, underground storage secured from Southern Natural Gas Company or Southern, and Transcontinental Gas Pipeline or Transco, liquefied natural gas, also known as LNG, and compressed natural gas, also known as CNG. Dominion Energy South Carolina combines these supply options with interstate transportation to meet its firm demand under varying weather conditions at reasonable cost. In my pre-filed testimony, I also provide a review of the natural gas market during the review period, and in compliance with Commission Order number 2022-857, I introduced the company's evaluation of the feasibility, cost, and benefits to its customers of a natural gas hedging program. Dr. Hua Fang provides a discussion of the evaluation and the findings in her testimony. During the review period, Dominion Energy South Carolina contracted for sufficient supplies of natural gas, provide a reliable service to its customers, and adequately and prudently maintain gas storage and transportation assets to meet the needs of the system. I respectfully request the Commission find that Dominion Energy South Carolina's cost of gas purchases and asset management were reasonable and prudent for the review period. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. I'll now turn to you, Dr. Fang. Would you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Hua Fang.
And Dr. Fang, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am a managing director with Black & Veatch Management Consulting, LLC. My office is in Houston, Texas.
Dr. Fang, have you prepared or caused to be prepared under your direct supervision, direct testimony, which has been pre-filed in this docket that consists of 10 pages?
Yes.
Are there any changes or corrections required of your corrected testimony?
There is one correction of my testimony is on page 10, line 2. The letter, the word buying should be selling.
All right, Dr. Fang, are there any other changes or corrections required of your corrected testimony?
No.
Okay, if I ask you all the questions contained in your corrected testimony, subject to the corrections you just made, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Okay. Chair Belzer, we would move into the record the pre-filed corrected testimony of Dr. Fang as corrected from the stand.
May I just confirm that correction on line 2, page 10, was to change the word buying to selling. Is that correct?
Yes.
And, okay. Dr. Fang's corrected, pre-filed corrected direct testimony, as corrected from the stand today with that one correction, will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Chair Belzer.
And Dr. Fang, can you pull that microphone a little bit closer? You sound like you're pretty soft-spoken, and I just want to make sure we can all hear you.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Dr. Fang, did you also have an exhibit attached to your direct testimony that was pre-filed in this docket?
Yes.
And do you have any changes or corrections required of that exhibit?
2 similar corrections on exhibit HF-2. The first one is on page 8 of the report. And again, the word buying from the third paragraph from the bottom, the word buying should be selling. The other correction is on page 46. The third paragraph from the bottom, buying should be selling.
In both of those corrections, that's the last line of that third paragraph from the bottom.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fang. I believe you also had one other exhibit attached to your testimony, which was your CV. Are there any changes or corrections required of your CV?
No.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fang. Chair Belzer, will you move into the record the exhibits attached to Dr. Fang's testimony, which is identified as HF1 and also HF2, as she just corrected from the stand, and ask that those be marked and accepted into the record as the next hearing composite exhibit.
Dr. Fang's exhibits attached to her pre-filed corrected direct testimony will be marked for as a composite exhibit, and as exhibit 2 was corrected from the stand. I'm saying this all wrong, but I think we'll get the gist. Her exhibits as corrected will be a composite exhibit marked for hearing exhibit 3 and received into the evidence of this case.
That was perfect, Chair Belzer. I'm with you. I'm with you. You got that right. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Fang, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes.
Would you please deliver that at this time?
Yes. Good morning. Hopefully, we're still in the morning. Chairman Bowser and members of the commission, my testimony discusses the company's portfolio of gas supply. Black & Veatch was engaged by Dominion Energy South Carolina to provide an independent assessment of the feasibility, costs, and benefits to the company's natural gas customers of a natural gas hedging program. The purpose of my direct testimony is to present the results from this independent assessment, which is attached to my direct testimony as Exhibit HF-2. The purpose of the Black & Veatch report was to provide an overview of natural gas hedging in general, review Dominion Energy South Carolina's prior hedging program, evaluate Dominion Energy South Carolina's current supply cost, and provide an illustrative assessment of different hedging instruments under different price scenarios. Black & Veatch's recommendations are as follows. First, Dominion Energy South Carolina should continue to effectively utilize storage, which provides Dominion Energy South Carolina with reliability assurance that guaranteed natural gas supplies will be available to meet its customers' needs, even during peak demand periods or temporary supply disruptions, and is an effective way to shelter the company's customers from extremely high natural gas prices during supply-constrained winter months. This strategy has helped Dominion Energy South Carolina avoid significant costs during supply-constrained periods, and it will continue to be effective in the future. Second, Dominion Energy South Carolina should continue to implement a 12-month rolling average for customer billing related to natural gas fuel cost. This approach provides the company customers with a more stable and predictable pricing structure and smooth out any short-term fluctuations in the natural gas markets. Customers generally appreciate steady, predictable bills to manage family and business finances. It is expected to be an effective mechanism in the future. Third, the cost benefits of implementing a hedging program using financial instruments should be more carefully explored and assessed. There could be additional benefits from implementing a hedging program using those financial instruments. However, there are costs and risks associated with financial hedging, and there could be unfavorable outcomes from any financial hedging strategies. The cost and benefit should be more carefully explored and assessed, including program management costs, market liquidity, and the availability of hedging instruments in the regional market. The report also contains general considerations for potential hedging program if deemed appropriate. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Dr. Fain. Chair Belzer, this panel is available for cross-examination by ORS as well as examination by the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Office of Regulatory Staff?
No questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions for these witnesses? Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you. I believe it's good afternoon now. So let me start out with Ms. Jackson, and I'm looking at your Exhibit 1, and particularly Southern Natural Gas. And those contracts, it looks to me like they all expire next August. And in my opinion, that's coming up pretty soon. So what's going on with that?
Yes, sir. There's a strategic reason for that. In the last Southern Natural rate case, we negotiated a comeback provision, and Southern Natural is required to file their next rate case next year. And so that's why those contracts are tied to that period when they come back for that rate case. So it gives us the ability to work with them to find out what their new rates are going to be before we renew those contracts.
Okay. And looking at the storage, it's the same thing. So I would assume that same provision is related to the storage.
Yes, sir. We'll look at both the transportation and storage rates.
And looking at the storage, by far, that is the largest capacity of storage and withdrawal. So just kind of planning ahead, if that doesn't turn out real well, are there other options?
There aren't other options, but it gives us some negotiating leverage in the rate case when our contracts are up for renewal.
Okay, I'm not going to ask for any more information on that because I hope you can negotiate strong.
Yes, sir, we plan to.
All right. I just wanted to talk a little bit about options other than hedging in terms of perhaps something that could be done to help smooth customer bills. And one thing I thought about is could the period be extended from 12 months to, I don't know, 18 or 24 months? I mean, theoretically, customers' bills could go up, down every month to adjust for the gas cost. And so obviously that's not what you want to do. So I guess what I'm thinking is, does it make any sense to look into other options, longer term, as opposed to the 12-month period that's now being used, or anything else? I'm just asking for ideas and thoughts.
Well, initially, when we implemented the 12-month rolling PGA mechanism, I was around during the time period where we suspended the financial hedging program for DESC. And what we heard loud and clear from the Office of Regulatory Staff and the Commission at that point in time was try to find a hedging program with low cost, because the cost of the financial hedging at that time had added roughly $53 million to the cost of gas. And so we developed the rolling 12-month PGA mechanism, which other utilities in our state do not have. And initially, there was a lower threshold where we had to change the rates. And I believe that first year or two, we changed the rates the majority of the months. So we came back before the commission, I want to say 2 or 3 years after the initial implementation, and we increased the threshold to that 4 cents that Ms. Smith referred to earlier. And we have not seen as many monthly changes to the PGA as we had previously under the initial implementation. So that may be another thing that we could look at, as possibly raising the threshold. But I will say, and I think Dr. Fang and Black & Veatch's analysis has shown that the rolling 12-month PGA mechanism has lowered volatility, and there's no cost associated with that physical hedging program, if you will.
Right, and that was really a big part of my concern, is the costs of the hedging. And so I'm wondering if perhaps you all could look into a different option and provide us with some information as to, what would be the impact if you made some changes, whether you go 18 months, 24 months, whether you increase from 4 cents to 5 cents. I don't know. I'm just putting this out there as an idea, and what do you think?
Okay. We'll consider that. And one thing that is different on the LDC side versus the generation side, and that's our next phase of the evaluation, is to conduct a financial hedging evaluation on the generation side, is that we don't have this monthly mechanism, if you will, that we do an annual fuel adjustment. So that is one big difference between the LDC and the generation side of the business.
And so would there be any options to think about something different on the electric side, that similar to what we're talking about here?
The complicating factor on the electric side is that we will be evaluating the cost of various fuels. So you'll have natural gas, coal, purchased power, solar. We don't have that on the LDC side because gas is the only fuel that we have access to. So that's what we're working with Black & Veatch now on. We'll take the fundamentals that Black & Veatch has provided to us in the LDC report, and then the next phase is to look at it from an electric generation standpoint. So until we get that analysis back in, I don't want to speculate on what may be in the report. But we'll have that for the fuel proceeding.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Caston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, ladies.
Hi.
And you actually answered one of my questions
Okay.
before it was asked, so thank you. Ms. Fang, you don't specifically recommend that Dominion hedge gas, but it seems that Black and Veatch says, continuing looking at it and assessing it. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's our recommendation.
And did you see or determine anything, if Dominion is doing anything wrong or could do anything better relative to gas supply absent a hedging program?
No, actually, the LDCs utilize natural gas storage capacity as a way of hedging and mitigating demand patterns and high price. Is fairly typical. A lot of LDCs employ that strategy. But the 12 months rolling kind of billing, customer billing practice is, I have not seen that in other LDCs. I think from that perspective, the combination of using a physical natural gas contract capacity as well as a 12 months rolling mechanism that really perform the two main functions of a hedging program. One is try to make sure you have reliable gas supply and avoid catastrophic gas price spikes. That can be done using natural gas storage. I think then secondly, you want to minimize the fluctuation of customer bills on a month-to-month basis. I think Dominion Energy has done that very well with a 12-month rolling approach.
Thank you. I assume you agree with that?
Yes, sir, I do.
Same question I asked Mr. McGlohorn, because it was in your testimony relative to in the future, you're going to need additional interstate capacity, gas capacity. Do you know about when?
We are currently working with Santee Cooper to develop a shared resource in the state of South Carolina, and it is going to take that type of load to anchor an interstate pipeline, I should say, multiple interstate pipeline projects to make it economic to bring additional interstate pipeline capacity to the state. So I think we're very fortunate in our state to have growth on both the electric and the gas side. And so I think with that shared resource, coupled with industrial need and the LDC growth need, that we will be able to anchor a project. We're just in the process of evaluating the different options that we received as part of that RFP and to determine where we go from there. But it will certainly take an expansion on Carolina Gas Transmission and then an expansion on the upstream, either Transco or Southern Natural.
And you say you're studying that now, so perhaps at the next opportunity we have, you'll have an idea of like in 3 years.
Yes, sir.
5 years. So.
The estimated in-service date based on the shared resource need is somewhere between 2028 and 2029. Of course, that will be subject to filing the applications at FERC on both Carolina Gas Transmission and the upstream pipeline, and exactly what type of work those pipelines are going to have to do. Will it be brownfield type work? Will it be on existing right-of-way? That type of thing. But I certainly think that our state has an opportunity, and it's not just our state that is capacity constrained. We're seeing that in the entire natural gas industry. It is very difficult, as Mr. McGlohorn testified to permit and build anything right now. It just takes longer than it has in the past.
And I guess along those lines, same question I asked Mr. McGlohorn too. What can Dominion do to help get interstate pipelines constructed?
We have supported Mountain Valley Pipeline as an example. We have filed letters of support with FERC. We filed letters of support in the Court of Appeals. We have done what we can to support interstate pipeline projects. However, when it gets to that stage of litigation, there's not a whole lot that we can do. So short of this country developing an overall energy plan that understands that natural gas supports renewable energy and will be required to support that going forward in the next 10 to 20 years, or some type of legislation that limits the timeline that these projects can be litigated. So for example, I've been working with Mountain Valley Pipeline now for 7 years. And the majority of that period of time was not related to the FERC permitting or even to the local permitting, but it was litigation related to those permits. And once it goes to the courts, there is no specific timeline. So once a case is decided, an appeal can be made on that case. So it's almost like we're in this circular argument of going back and questioning that order. So there needs to be some type of definitive timeline to determine when a pipeline can actually construct. And it's added tremendous cost to these projects. I believe the last estimate that Mountain Valley Pipeline gave that we filed in that letter, it's gone from 3.6 billion to 7.3 billion.
Yes, it's more than doubled?
Yes, sir.
And you understand that the commission, we have no authority in those things, do we?
Yes, sir, I do.
Is there anything that comes to mind you think the commission could do or should do?
If we come before you, or when we come before you for the next tranche of interstate pipeline capacity, we have had other commissions to file letters of support if the time is available. And I think in the past, the Office of Regulatory Staff and possibly this commission has actually filed letters in certain FERC dockets. That may be something that y'all consider doing in the future. I don't know that that helps a whole lot in litigation, but it may help in the actual permitting process. A lot of the special interest groups that Mr. McGlohorn referred to question the need for interstate pipeline capacity or fossil fuels in general. However, until we see advancements in renewable storage, natural gas is going to be needed in order to provide reliable service to both our LDC customers and to our generation customers. So I just don't see over the foreseeable future how we can eliminate natural gas altogether. I believe in a diversified portfolio in my personal life and in my professional life, but I really believe natural gas is going to be needed.
Now, just out of curiosity, how long ago was it that the commission sent letters supporting things?
It's been a lot, and I think it may have been the Office of Regulatory Staff, but I'll have to go back and look. I know that we have worked with other commissions in neighboring states to do that. So it may be an opportunity in the future. We can certainly, look into it.
I'll let others speak. I'm pretty sure we can't do that. But that said, I don't really know what the limits are. But nonetheless, that wasn't my intent or question. Maybe there's something that we hadn't thought about or we're missing or overlooking. That's all I was interested in. And thank you both, and look forward to your study when we get around to electrical.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Justin Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Jackson, good seeing you again. Dr. Fang, thanks for being here. Ms. Jackson, I really don't have too many questions for you. I want to talk with Dr. Fang, but I do want to thank you for providing Dr. Fang and her cost-benefit analysis. Dr. Fang, there have been a lot of conversations around the costs and benefits of hedging, and your report covers some of those issues. Based on your report and your research, do you have an opinion, a general opinion about the prudency of financial hedging in a gas operation, in Dominion's gas operation here in South Carolina?
Hedging has to be evaluated on a case-to-case basis, depending upon really trying to understand the potential exposure of the utility to certain gas prices. And I think in our case, when we look at Dominion Energy South Carolina's case, we look at the fluctuations of the gas cost to customers associated with the pricing points that's really related to. And we do see there are fluctuations in monthly gas prices, and I think that certain types of hedging would be beneficial. However, after we look at the supply gas portfolio that Dominion Energy South Carolina currently has, it does have a large mitigation power by using the natural gas, by contracting for natural gas storage contracts. So that really takes the lion's share of the potential really risky spikes during some of the accidental periods. If you think that I came from Houston, Texas, so I lived through the winter storm Uri in Texas. So that is a period which is just caused by a natural force, and there is no way to really make sure that you are protected against that, because all your decisions of hedging will be made with some understanding of the information you had available at the time. But I think those unforeseeable events is hard to predict. So we would think that some mechanism so that you can be prevented and sheltered from this kind of events is going to be very beneficial. I think Dominion Energy South Carolina's storage contract and LNG peak shaving facility that does provide that function. In addition, the other kind of function of hedging will be try to understand that people will prefer a stable rate on a month-to-month basis. They will not want to really see their rate goes up and down very significantly based on market price fluctuations. And I think this is why we think Dominion Energy South Carolina's the 12-month rolling billing approach is very beneficial. In addition to that, we actually look at certain hedging strategies using market information to really see that if that is the condition, and that is the Dominion Energy South Carolina's gas supply portfolio, and if they enter into certain contracts, we actually test 3 financial instruments. One is futures, and the other 2 were call options. And looking at future possibilities of price scenarios for the 8 and 12 month period, and it turns out that overall, all of the 3 hedging strategies had losses when in most of the kind of the likely situations when the price scenarios come about. And I think it only makes sense if you experience a very extreme conditions during the winter months. I think overall, based on that analysis, we think at the time, Dominion Energy South Carolina, they do not need to implement a financial hedging program. But we understand as market conditions change, there may be opportunities to evaluate the possibilities of the benefit and cost benefit of hedging.
Thank you so much, Dr. Feng, for that. So I want to unpack your statement there. So in your professional expert opinion, it's unfair to take the general position that hedging is a prudent part of any utilities, any gas utilities operation, business practice, I should say.
Yes, what I was thinking is that you need to make sure that you really do a very thorough assessment of the utilities portfolio and the current practice.
Right. So again, in your expert opinion, it wouldn't be fair to say just because one utility in a state has a hedging program, a financial hedging program, that all utilities in a particular state should have a financial hedging program.
That's right.
Right. And based on your report, Section 3 specifically, you go through several utilities in several states, and it seems that you have found that some hedging programs provide gains, if you will, or savings, and others provide losses.
Exactly. I think that's just highlight that hedging is quite customized to different utilities. It could be somebody's like good fortune, could be others' misery. So.
Right. So from a ratepayer perspective, when I look at my monthly bill, the impact of a hedging program or not having a financial hedging program could vary based on market circumstances, and there are no guarantees, or I shouldn't expect any guarantees of savings just because my utility has a financial hedging program.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it also fair to say that a financial hedging program comes with costs no matter what?
Yes. One obvious example is that if you want to enter into hedging programs, such as you try to buy a call option, the premium of the call option will be a certain cost. That's a fixed cost that you actually have to pay at the time of the contract. But the effectiveness or the benefits of that call option could be that if the price does not rise to the level that exceed the strike price of the call option will be expired worthless. So that the premium you paid at the beginning of the period will be the net cost to the customers. And yeah, that basically think that for some of the hedging strategies that the cost is certain, the benefit is problematic, like not probabilistic, is
right, uncertain, if you will.
Yeah, uncertain. Yes.
Okay, so this is the last area I'm going to explore with you. So when you go back and look at Dominion's decision to move in a different direction regarding financial hedging, I think back in 2006, based on, I think, about $58 million in losses, based on your review, you could argue, or there's an argument that exists that was a prudent decision based on the information that they had at the time.
I think that's largely as a result of market conditions. There was a period of extremely volatile natural gas prices in the early 2000s. So that's in 2001, that was the California energy crisis. Basically, people start to think that the natural gas price could have huge volatility, and that could result in very large, significant impact on both the power price in addition to the gas price. So the consumers could suffer significantly through that. This is why different regulatory bodies as well as market participants start to think that a hedging program or ways to reduce price volatility may be a prudent thing to do in order to stabilize the customer bills. There were a significant amount of natural gas storage facilities being built in the Gulf Coast area at the same time. So I think for the next few years, because of a lot of natural gas infrastructure has been built, and also there is very diligent, maybe watching out, trying to mitigate natural gas price volatility. So this is why a lot of participants had basically put into place certain hedging schemes. But I think it was effective in a few years right after that, during the 2006 through before 2009 timeframe, because that was a period people start to think that natural gas supply is going to become short in the U.S. And there were discussions regarding natural gas, LNG, regas terminals to be built along the Gulf Coast. So that was effective period for hedging, and I think that is where we understand a lot of participants started to implement a hedging program. However, what happened is that Marcellus Shale has started to develop in late in 2009. I think it comes down to 2010, 2011 timeframe. And Marcellus gas becomes a very cheap and very big supply reservoir to meet all the demand in the of natural gas in the U.S. lower 48. So that results in a very prolonged period of declining natural gas prices. And natural gas price volatility started to really decline at the same time. So that is the major cause of the losses associated with the hedging programs, because the hedging programs, the purpose were trying to lock in a certain price level, but with the declining price trend, the actual price is actually lower than what the contract you have entered into prior to that. This is why basically all of those hedging programs started to suffer significant amount of loss. And what also happened is that there were large winter supply events that occurred during certain periods. One of them is the polar vortex in 2014. And then we also see the winter storm Uri in 2021. And I think then other smaller winter storms. So I think then the other recent event is the Russian-Ukraine war that leads to a global shortage of natural gas supply. So all of those events had temporarily, I think in the case of the recent period, have made natural gas price become really volatile for a short period of time. And I think that leads a lot of participants to really put in some reactive action just to see that whether they want to really repurpose or reactive the hedging program. But I think barring those events, we think the general trend is for natural gas is that U.S. has steady supply of natural gas. You are not going to be experiencing significant shortage that's going to be happening within controllable factors in the market. So we think that we actually received a lot of requests from power generators as well as electric utilities to ask our advice about whether to put in place a hedging program for electricity, for generation fuel. But that's just, as I said, this is just based on the market trend and recent events. I think right now the effect of both the Texas winter storm as well as the Ukraine-Russian war has kind of declined or died down a bit. So we think under this circumstance, it appears to be that the best approach for Dominion Energy South Carolina is to continue with the current fiscal hedges in place and the rolling 12 months billing without entering into any significant financial hedge contracts.
Thank you, ma'am. And I want to just make sure I'm clear on this. The physical hedging program, is it I think obviously it's less expensive than financial hedging, but does it come at no cost?
The cost associated with storage contracts, you just have to pay for storage capacity. That was it like transportation contracts, you need to pay the storage operator or the pipeline operator who owns the storage a certain amount of money to be able to have rights to the storage capacity.
And those are, in your opinion, less risky than financial hedging agreements and costs associated with such?
Yes.
Okay. So I see your recommendations continue to effectively utilize DESC storage, continue to implement the 12-month rolling on a customer billing. And then here, I don't want to say I'm confused by this, but based on your report, your analysis, and the first two recommendations, what benefits do you see in continuing to explore the cost and benefits of implementing a financial hedging program?
That's really related to a market. I could think of two potential scenarios where you want to see whether you want to consider that. One is that if the demand for Dominion Energy South Carolina grows significantly, and especially during winter time, if the natural gas storage contract and the peak shaving facility it has in place may not be able to cover as much of the demand going forward during the certain months. So you may consider adding to some of level of protection for the larger demand amount you have. And secondly, if the market condition becomes such that it is very, price becomes very volatile. I think we know that winter prices tend to be relatively volatile compared to summer prices. But if the volatility significantly increase because of maybe there may be natural gas pipeline constraints continue to develop, and I think that leads to really very extremely high volatilities during winter months, then you may consider try to see that if you can get additional storage capacity, and if not, try to see that some level of financial hedge could be beneficial.
So based off that, is it fair to say that, in your opinion, the commission should ask Dominion every year or during these hearings whether or not market conditions have changed as to whether or not they should enter into some financial hedging programs? Is that an ongoing, constant analysis?
I do not think it's going to be kind of that frequent every year you have to ask, but I think periodically, maybe based on what the actual cost and actual market experience that the utility has experienced, try to see that going forward, if there are any significant change that they want to let the commission be aware of, and maybe asking for the possibility of reassessing the financial hedging program.
Okay. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Madam Chair, that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Thomas, you have...
Thank you. I just have a couple more questions. Ms. Jackson, when I was asking Mr. McGlowan some questions, he said you would be better positioned to answer the question, and I have no idea what the question was. Do you happen to remember, and have you already answered it?
Was it related to the CGT capacity?
Could have been.
Okay, I got updated numbers, and these are approximate, but it looks like on the CGT system, the LDC side has roughly 46% of the capacity on CGT. The generation side has 25%, so it's approximately 73 to 75% of their total system.
Okay. I appreciate you remembering that.
Okay.
So the reserve margin at 2.56%, how does that compare with other LDCs? Do you know?
Reserve margin is not, it's very difficult because I get asked this frequently from different jurisdictions. What is the appropriate reserve margin? And it's hard to say because it's not like I can go to Walmart and pick up additional firm transportation on an annual basis. So what we try to do is we're forecasting out 18 years. Our Economic Resource Group provides us with an annual update looking out 18 years. And then we look at that 10-year forecast of growth, and we are in constant discussions with our existing and potential interstate pipelines that could be building more infrastructure. And so we try to participate in these larger projects to get the economies of scale. So it varies because, just for instance, as Mr. McGlohorn said, I used to be able to say an interstate pipeline project I could count on in 3 years. Then it went to 5 years, and I'm in almost year 8 for Mountain Valley Pipeline. So it's really hard to estimate when that new pipeline capacity is going to come on. And so then you have to develop a contingency plan, such as an expansion of an existing LNG plant, a new LNG plant. So then there could be a couple of years where we have both of those supply sources online that we had not anticipated to come on that quickly. And you could have a much higher reserve margin than you had had in the past. But in order to reliably meet the demand of our customers, we may have to have higher reserve margins in the future. Now, one thing to be aware of is that the existing reserve margin that we're calculating on Carolina Gas Transmission does not include segmentation. However, I have yet, in my 25 years of working with Carolina Gas Transmission and its predecessor, when we inject gas from Bushy Park LNG facility, that helps their pressure in that lower part of the system. They have not denied that request. It's just that from a tariff perspective, it is considered secondary. But because of the location of our LNG facility in that Charleston area and the amount of gas that we can inject in a critical time period, it helps the overall Carolina Gas Transmission system. Now, some of the other segmentation that goes from Bushy Park, let's say back to Aiken or back to Columbia, that may not be approved. But getting gas into Charleston from Bushy Park typically would be approved unless there is something very unusual on their system.
Okay, thank you. So this is a little bit off the wall question, I suppose. So I remember way back in the 70s or 80s, when natural gas was hard to come by for totally different reasons than it is today. I remember, I believe that there was a policy whereby the company, the LDC, was not allowing new homes to add decorative gas lighting. And the reason that they did that, they said, this is what I remember, that having a gas light by your front door is like having a water heater hanging out there. And if you have one on both sides, that's like 2 water heaters there and then another one in the house. I know it's not a big thing, but if we're talking about constrained supplies, is that anything that's worth even thinking about?
I don't recall that initiative. And I'm not sure, I don't know. We're not to that point yet, I should say. I think, as Mr. McGlohorn said, the biggest, I should say the most difficult type of load for us to forecast is the industrial load. Number one, when they come in and look for potential economic development prospects here in our state, they ask, what's the cost of firm service? What's the cost of interruptible service? Then they're looking at multiple locations. So depending on the different geographic locations they have, we may have more reserve margin in those areas than we do in others. And it is a prospect. So when is the estimated time that they plan to be a part of our system? It's not as easy as projecting residential and commercial growth. So that's what makes it very difficult. Because as he stated, if we overestimate, then our reserve margin is going to look high for an extended period of time. But it's difficult to say, build it and they will come. You see what I'm saying? It's a delicate balance of having sufficient capacity but not overbuilding the system, because any incremental capacity is going to be expensive. I've said this for probably 8-10 years. We have taken advantage of all the low-hanging fruit in the interstate pipeline market. So now you're looking at costly infrastructure, and it's just taking longer to permit and to build. So the cost of any kind of construction has gone up.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioners, questions? Ms. Jackson, I just want to know about the 2.56% reserve margin shown on your exhibit RMJ2.
Yes, ma'am.
How does that compare to prior years?
It is going down, but once again, if you go back and look at 4 to 5 years ago, we were including segmentation into that calculation. Carolina Gas Transmission has made some upgrades. They've added a compressor station at Dorchester. So there have been some changes on their system. So we could potentially add back some volumes that we could use, as I stated, from Bushy Park into Charleston as part of that segmentation number, and that reserve margin would go up. So it's just dependent upon what we rely on to supply the demand needs in that Charleston area. Because as I said, Bushy Park supports the lower part of their system. When we inject gas into that point on Charleston, it helps their entire southern system.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Fang, thank you for being here. I just have maybe one or two questions for you. Do you see, well, I'm just asking about your experience. Have you seen companies quit using financial hedging programs?
I was personally involved in developing a hedging program with Nova Scotia Power. I think we started the program trying, they're like an electric utility in Nova Scotia, and their biggest risk is natural gas as a fuel. And their situation is a little bit kind of different from what we are seeing here, is that because there is a pipeline constraint going into New England, I think they purchase their natural gas at a New England-based pricing point, which is reliably volatile during winter months. So they wanted to implement a hedging program to just prevent prevent extremely high price and reduce price volatility. That program was very effective for the first few years where it was in place, but we know that we participated in one of their proceedings in 2011, 2012 period. They had a huge loss to the tune of about $12 million resulting from the hedging program. And we basically try to, because the fuel hedging policy and the impact on their fuel supply was documented with the commission at the time for Nova Scotia. So we were able to understand that the laws were according to the market conditions that was not within the purview of the utility. So they were allowed to recover the cost, but nonetheless, it did incur a significant loss in the system. We weren't involved later on in that. We just do not know whether they have changed course in terms of continue to implement the hedging program.
Okay. And as I can't remember if it was in your testimony or the report or both, but is my recollection correct that as natural gas prices decrease and are forecasted to decrease, that's not the appropriate time to try to do hedging, financial hedging? Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. Essentially, if you understand future price is going to be lower than current price, you wouldn't want to lock in anything.
And as things stand today, what is the forecast of natural gas over the next period? What, 6, 12 months, or what? I'm not sure what time period those forecasts are.
Yeah. So we did present kind of the perspective from 3 sources, different sources, in section 5 of the report. So, but as you can see, nothing is falling very, none of the sources of the future forecast is stable. So we do provide what we call fundamental-based price projections. I think based on that assumption, we do see going forward, price is going to be recovering in the future. So that was primarily driven by LNG export in the Gulf Coast. However, I want to hedge a little bit here in the sense that there are countless market factors that's out of anybody's control that could derail that projection. We present the projection as an outcome of the assumptions we have made. If any of the assumptions turn out to be not correct, the forecast could be wrong. And I think what we are seeing here is that even though the natural gas price is on a relatively high price trajectory, is going up, but in the near term, for the upcoming winter, because of the wild winter is expected, so people are projecting a price could be softer than normal terms.
You said softer?
Yeah, it's going to be lower than what you would expect in a normal.
Well, and that's where I was going to go. I thought you said softer, and I just want to make sure that meant lower. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Ms. Jackson, I did have one other point I wanted to get clarified. I've heard you testify, I think the last hearing we had and in this one, that for increased pipelines to be, or more pipelines to be added, there needed to be an anchor. And
Yes,
I think
ma'am.
you've referenced the the proposed or the discussed shared facility with Santee Cooper as being an anchor. Is that, explain anchor to me.
Okay. Typically, what natural gas pipelines will do is they have ongoing meetings with existing and potential customers, but they are looking at a large load, and typically that's 200, 300,000 decatherms per day. And in exchange for that size customer to sign a precedent agreement, which is a contract with a pipeline that states they want to enter into a firm transportation agreement, they become what's known as an anchor shipper. They're the first one to say, I'm committing to this project. And as part of that, they could receive some additional benefits, such as the option of a negotiated rate. They may get some benefits in the future, such as access to expansion capacity. They could get a longer term or, additional opportunities to renew that negotiated rate. So what the pipeline is looking for is someone that is going to commit for a large enough volume to announce or to really create this project, and then they're required by FERC to then post an open season on their electronic bulletin board, and then they'll see how much additional capacity they could have in the project before the project is finalized and it's filed at FERC.
So, I mean, basically, they have to have some assurance that they're going to have revenues to pay for that pipeline. Is that,
yes, ma'am.
And kind of
yes, ma'am. And FERC requires them to show a demonstrated need for the project.
And CTG is an interstate pipeline, is it?
They
not?
are now, yes, ma'am.
Okay. But even if the need was there for CTG, would that then kind of move up the pipeline so to speak, just like she used hedge? I liked that in her answer. Would that move up the pipeline so that either Transco or Southern may try to increase something too?
You'll see two different projects. So Carolina Gas Transmission will be one project, and there's a potential that we could be the anchor shipper on that project, and then we could be an anchor shipper on either a Southern Natural or a Transco project. So there will be two different projects. The upstream will feed into Carolina Gas Transmission, but they'll have to coordinate together. And I anticipate that FERC would have questions for both of them to understand how gas will flow from the upstream to Carolina Gas Transmission to that shared resource.
But are there constraints on Transco and Southern that they would have, am I understanding correctly that they would have to do some sort of increase in transmission to be able to serve an increase in CTG?
Yes, ma'am. So that's what I'm saying. Size. There will be two different projects announced, and you'll see two different open seasons, two different precedent agreements.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioners, further questions for this panel? Hearing none. Mr. Burgess, any redirect?
No, ma'am, no redirect.
Thank you.
And
Ladies, thank you for your testimony today, for being here. You may stand down.
Chair Belzer, that concludes the company's case.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. We're right at 1 o'clock. We've got to get ready for a commission business meeting. I got to give staff a chance to get lunch, and attorneys too, if you so desire. So let's adjourn until 3 o'clock. I don't know that the business meeting will take a full hour, but staff will have to reset for the continuation of the hearing. So y'all are free until 3 o'clock. Thank you very much.